What's up, guys? It's KB. Make sure you subscribe to the Underground Sports Philadelphia YouTube channel. Click the bell icon down below so you don't miss a single video from us. And thanks for tuning in to another video from Underground Sports Philadelphia. Now let's get into it.
Philadelphia, baby, you're gonna love it. Best sports fans in the world. Actually, the worst, but that's what makes them the best.
Welcome back to Top Bins, the show bringing you all the action from the Premier League and Serie A, England and Italy. I am your host Matt, joined by my Kigley co-host Dom. Dom, how are you?
Seen better days, but I'm kicking along. I'm kicking along. I'm here.
Jeez, man, that is white guy for really bad. That is
Nah, not really bad. It's just I've just been exhausted for some reason the last few days. So it's just been,
It's probably because the sun is setting at like 4:50 now.
Mm-hmm.
It's truly we're in the bad time of the year where it's not quite time for the holidays just yet. So there's not much to look forward to. You know, we have Thanksgiving and stuff, which is like fine, but like there's no like Christmas and like all that comes with that and the kind of fun family tradition things. It's just cold now and it gets dark too early, and I don't know, like there's not much benefit. It's like after January 2nd, just like put me out of my misery until June, is my personal feeling. But we have plenty of action to get to today, as we had not the final weekends, but we had a send-off for the international break in both leagues here. We're going to start in Italy, where we had Roma and Lazio play to a 0-0 draw, which I think really sums up their season so far. A pretty boring game, not a ton of action in this. No clinical edge or polished finishing on the final end of any of the forays into the final third for either team. Both these teams, too, kind of uninspiring to start the year, uninspiring in this game. You know, we talked about the fact that both of them outside looking in on European spots, when I think we both, to varying degrees, expected them to be at least fighting for maybe not Champions League, but Europa League and things like that. Has not been the case so far this season for them. So not the best Derby della Roma that we've ever had, and I think we can just move on. I don't know what more there is to say about this game. There really wasn't much there.
No, even though I picked Roma to be an overachiever this season, they're not living up to my bet. So they're very uninspiring right now. It seems like all they depend on is Lukaku, and he's a shell of that Inter form that he was his first tenure over there. I don't know. Lazio, it's interesting. It's almost like they can't figure out who they want as their like main number 9. It's like, do they want an aging Ciro Immobile, or do they want Castellanos? And some games you see one start, other games you see the other one start, and it's just Lazio still puts a lot of faith in their elder statesmen. If Immobile and Luis Alberto can't get things done, it's dreadful for them, in my opinion.
Well, they don't replace Milinkovic-Savic, right? Really, they don't have that engine in midfield, and I think you're definitely missing his ability in transition, especially. And I think you're right too with Immobile and with Castellanos in that too. Like, there's this kind of bridging of the gap now between, I think, eras of Lazio, where Immobile is not quite at his goal scoring peak anymore, and I think it is time to start thinking about that next stage of what a Lazio number 9 and front line looks like. So yeah, it has led to, I think, a little bit of, and it's been interesting too with Maurizio Sarri, because I think he's a good manager, but it's been a strange season for them. They've really struggled for goals, especially, I think, has been the issue. Only 13 goals scored so far this season. Their top scorer is Luis Alberto, tied with Ciro Immobile with 3 goals. That just isn't good enough. If you want to be a team contending for Europe. It's been a strange season for them. Roma, I have more faith that they can figure this out. They've had a lot of injury problems to start the year, and they're at least looking like we've seen shades of Roma, be it they're what we expected them to be. Lazio, I think I'd be more concerned about long term with them this season and maybe even going forward, because I don't know, with this squad and the lack of investment in it, kind of where we're going here with them.
They don't even have like a squad that like you can use the excuse like, oh, they're focused on the Champions League. You know what I mean? Like they don't even have a squad where you can be like, okay, we see what you're doing, and kind of like what West Ham did last year. Albeit it was the Conference League, but that's still European competition. It's just uninspiring.
I mean, oddly enough, they might find themselves into the knockouts of the Champions League, right? Like they're second in their group, so it's But yeah, you don't feel like this is a team that's gonna go on a run, right? Like Atalanta in years past in the Champions League, you felt like and did the COVID season, they go deep into the Champions League. We've had that from some of these Italian teams. Obviously like Roma making Europa League final. So Fiorentina doing the same last year for
it's
the
like
Conference League.
It's like if they do get into the knockouts, they're going to be playing really top tier teams now. And do you have the confidence in them to get a result?
Well, that's
because if they come in second, they're going to play a first place team from another group.
Right. Well, here's who could finish in first. Okay, right. So you're gonna have Bayern definitely finishing in first. Likely Arsenal, Real Madrid, Real Sociedad or Inter. Those are you could. I don't know. I don't. You're not favorites in a matchup like that, but that's winnable. Dortmund, PSG, Milan, Newcastle, like so much is up in there. But let's just say if that's one of the top two as is, let's just say it's Dortmund. There's potential there for an upset. City, you're not beating City in a two tie. This one's interesting. Barcelona and Porto are tied for points. Let's say it's Porto who finishes top in that group. I don't know. I think Lazio could get a result there. Who knows? But yeah, it doesn't feel like a team. There is some merit, though, to making the knockout stages and a financial bonus, too, obviously, and that is important for Lazio. But yeah, they just have not had an inspiring start to the year. And I wonder, maybe after this international break, if we start to see things change, start to see any kind of improvement. We see that with a lot of teams when you have these breaks, you might find something to latch onto. And this is, a long period now of straight through play. And Italy has like a reduced winter break this year. Normally they have a pretty long layoff for like the holidays. That's been reduced this season. So you don't even have your normal kind of longer layoff for Serie A this year. So you're going to see these teams now, like this is, once we return from here, it's not till March that you get another international break. So you're on a really big sprint now, or I should say, this is the long part of your run before you get to like a sprint at the finish of the season.
Well, you mentioned the financial implications of making the group stage. Maybe that is their plan because you mentioned earlier about they don't really have a replacement for Milinkovic-Savic. Although like they hope that Guendouzi can be that guy, but I think that they're two completely different styles of player. And then you talk about what do you really want to do with your number 9? Maybe that money can be used to inject some youth or some talent into the team. So maybe that is the case. Maybe, Sarri is keeping them focused on getting out of that group and getting into the group stage and maybe getting a couple results here or there because, that extra money is always helpful, especially for a team that is their chances of being in Europe next year are bleak right now. Yeah.
And I think it's really their attacking options right now are just old. You have Felipe Anderson, you have Pedro and Immobile as kind of your main three. Castellanos sort of filtering in every now and again, but
in 2017 that would be a sick lineup.
Yeah, but I mean, agree.
6 years ago,
Zaccagni's had some like injuries and things like that this year. Hasn't been quite his like mercurial self. He was someone that was carrying some of the goal load for them last year. Hasn't quite worked out that way, but yeah, they just have not hit the ground running in any sort of way. Their midfield is not terrible, but yeah, it's really the goal scoring aspect of it that I think has me most concerned. Speaking of goal scoring, Dom, I know you're not going to like linger on this for any amount of time, but we have to give a lot of credit to DeMarco's goal for Inter. One of the goals of the season, early contenders for sure. A lovely lob, not quite from the halfway line, but an incredible angle. Maybe about 10 yards.
Did he mean to shoot it?
Yes. He absolutely meant to shoot it. It wasn't like one of those things where it's like someone crossing it into the box and it, lays into the side netting. Like he meant to do what he did. There was no fluke about it, and it was.
Are you sure about that?
Oh my god! Here we go. This guy no credit whatsoever. Come on.
I mean, he pulled
Alessandro
out his
Florenzi-esque.
David Beckham-esque.
David Beckham. Yeah, a lot of Beckham comps for this one. Because there's two kind of styles of. Again, it's not quite a halfway shot here, but there's like two kind of styles. So there's a halfway shot, like your Xabi Alonso, your Wayne Rooney, where it's like they kind of see that the goalkeeper's a little off the line, and it's almost like a direct kick, like a free kick. Like they're really just shaping up and just hitting it, hoping. This felt like with the Beckham one, there's a little more precision here. Even the Beckham one was more central than this. Just a great goal, honestly. I mean, I must have rewatched it about 10 times, and a few of those in English, a few of those in Italian to get the full range of experience. The bigger story is that Inter won again, and they go into the international break top of SerieA. They've looked really good. They've looked like the most competent and well-rounded Italian team, so it only makes sense that they find themselves top of the table at the moment. And Lautaro Martinez has been so far the MVP of the season. I don't know why you're shaking your head. You called him to be the top scorer in Serie A, so you should be happy. You had a great choice, in the offseason here. But yeah, Inter looks like the cream of the crop. What this has done, and what this is also going to be the case in England, is set up for when we return from the international break. Both leagues have the two top teams playing each other. You have Manchester City and Liverpool right off the break, and you now have Inter and Juventus. All of a sudden, Derby dell'Italia has a little extra edge to it. Not that it ever needs an extra edge, but Juventus right behind them now in the table, and it feels like maybe with Milan's draw over the weekend that this is our title race, is Inter and Juventus. I know that doesn't make you happy, judged by your reaction. But
that draw really pissed me off, man. It really. You know what? I don't want to take too much credit, but I did call that on Jad. He's a. I don't know if you've seen like any of the Twitter posts or anything. The Barra Brothers podcast. It's another football podcast. It's like a couple guys from England. They've gone viral a few times. They've got some good clips. It's a good podcast. But he was talking about, he quote tweeted somebody because they were like, "Oh, calm down. Don't be so pessimistic about Milan. They're playing Lecce." And he's like, "You must be new here." And then I left a response. I was like, "It's going to be 2-0 to Milan until about the 75th minute. It's going to end 2-2." And it was supposed to end 3-2, but goal gets called back in the end. As for the top of the table, it disgusts me how Juventus just finds a way to win, given how uninspiring they seem. But Inter, like you said, look like the most complete club. They look like the most complete team in terms of attacking, in terms of defense. I mean, DiMarco, in the sense of I am a fan of the Italian national team. He's an incredible left back, being able to go forward in the attack and also as a defender, he's really, really good. Acerbi is having like a renaissance season. It seems to me like he's been incredible for them, both in Europe and in the domestic league. Lautaro's on a tear. Their midfield is just quality. So it's going to be an exciting 2-horse race. I think if Milan don't turn their season around, Juventus and Inter are going to start running away with the top 2 spots, and there's going to be no team in the league that can really catch them.
Yeah, I think for me, Inter were my pick coming into the season. I felt the same way about Inter last year, that I thought they were good enough, and I still strangely think that they were the best team in Italy last year. Obviously, they don't end up winning the title, and Napoli really run away with SerieA. But I felt like Inter, and it bore out too, because they get to the Champions League final, and I think they were maybe unlucky to not have a better result in the Champions League final. They had opportunities for sure. They gave Manchester City a lot of problems in that final. Like, I felt like Inter, even last year, were the team that I trusted the most from Italy to beat anyone on their day. You know, like on any given day. You know, and they even did that against Napoli. Obviously, again, Napoli, consistency-wise, were much better, and that's how you win a league title. I don't mean to diminish Napoli, but yeah, I was a little disappointed in Inter's consistency. That consistency so far this season has been much better. And I think it's a big credit to the coaching staff there, to Inzaghi, who almost left Inter last season, you know, sticking around for another year, and how good they've been. And yeah, you're right to point out to Lautaro Martinez and just how good he has been. So yeah, looking forward. And you mentioned DeMarco too. You know, Italy could definitely use some goals like that. For, you know, they're struggling right now to qualify. You know, for Euro 2024, so they could use some DeMarco goals this week for sure. Let's move on to this because, you know, speaking of Napoli, we have a new manager there. Rudy Garcia, I did not like the management appointment from the start. I don't think a lot of people did. It was a little bit of a head scratcher. They lose over the weekend, and you know, this is your last opportunity, like we said, until March, where we have an international break where you can kind of, it's easier to bed in a new manager. We haven't had a lot of manager dismissals so far in either of our two leagues. Off the top of my head, I actually think this is the first. I don't think anyone from Italy's lost a job, and no one from England has lost a job yet. So strange to have made it pretty deep into the season at this point, you know, like just about a third of the way through, and you're getting your first dismissals. In steps Walter Mazzari, which is a decision. It's a choice. It's a manager. It's a hiring. Last seen in Italy 3 years ago for Torino, and wasn't great with them. It's just it's a bizarre choice, honestly.
Yeah. I mean, you know,
they were going after Marseille's coach, and I don't know what happened there. I'm sure there was a money issue, if we're being very frank, with De Laurentiis. And Mazzari is just,
yeah,
it feels very uninspired. It feels like a very uninspired appointment.
Did you listen to the Athletic Football podcast about Napoli, the newest one?
I did not.
So you know, when they spoke about this, and it was very interesting because, you know, obviously, you know, if you've been a fan and you watch SerieA for a long time, you know, when you think of Walter Mazzari and you think of Napoli, you're thinking, oh, you know, Cavani, Lavezzi, Hamšík. You're thinking about that team, and you're thinking about that 2013, 2012, 2013
sponsorship.
Yeah,
like
dude, iconic.
Green.
Like pre Koulibaly days, man. Like very iconic team. A team that ended up, you know, running with Juventus a couple years. You know, granted, maybe it wasn't Mazzari at the helm. You know, Sarri came in afterwards and really, you know, unlocked that team. But it was always a quality team, a quality opponent that you would come across. But ever since he left Napoli the first time, he was just a very uninspiring manager. You know, whether he was at Watford or he went to Cagliari and he was tasked on saving them from relegation and failed. Took over Torino, didn't really do too much. They said it's almost like he's failing up. But it's like, I wanted to ask you this. Do you think that this is a long-term thing, or do you think this is something till the end of the season? Because, you know, Napoli was linked with Antonio Conte, but Conte was saying like he doesn't like taking over a team in the middle of the season. Is he sort of like a placeholder until they can go and get their guy?
I sure hope so. Like I would not. He's not a long-term solution, and he is almost like if you lost your manager in like March, I could see Mazzari making a little more sense in that. He's kind of a name, and I think no one has like really any negative opinions of him. It's just like, and he has some attachment, like you said, to Napoli, of course, you know, and there's some memories there, and I think maybe that's why De Laurentiis ends up. De Laurentiis reminds me a little bit of, in America in the NFL we had Jerry Jones for the Cowboys. and Jerry Jones is like a particular kind of guy, and I think ultimately just wants a coach that he can like have like meals with and wants to talk to. De Laurentiis kind of strikes me as the same kind of guy. Like he wants someone, especially someone that listens to him.
He's a very unique character.
I really feel like he wants someone who just sits there and listens to him over dinner. Talk about whatever's on his mind, and talk about 70s and 80s movies that he produced.
What's incredible to me is that he made the announcement, like he made a tweet saying like, "Welcome back, Walter," before the club ever made an official announcement about Rudy Garcia being sacked. Like it is crazy. Like, you talk a couple weeks ago, it was very public that Napoli was shopping around for new managers to look to replace Rudy Garcia. And then Rudy Garcia ends up keeping his job. So like, first off, like, how do you feel as a manager when you know that your club is looking to replace you and then they bring you right back? And then ultimately, like, you find out before the club even like makes an official announcement, like, oh yeah, you're going to be replaced with this guy. And
that's De Laurentiis behavior. Right there.
Exactly.
That's classic.
It totally
that's
is.
ADL. Let's be very frank there. It has to be a this season option. Antonio Conte is interesting because I actually think him and Mazzari a little similar in some ways. Conte's had more success as a manager and has definitely more like, I think we associate Conte with a certain tactical style, but they're both kind of abrasive people too. Like Mazzari's not like a arm around the shoulder type of manager. Like he's a little more old school. So it's just it's a little. It's a bizarre choice. I'm curious to see how and it's not like they have an easy schedule either. He's walking
their next 4 games are tough.
He's walking into a tough situation. So,
not only do they have to play Inter and Juventus, they have to play Real Madrid in the Champions League. Like,
right, and they need results in the Champions League too, to progress through. Because I'm sure also De Laurentiis is saying, "Listen, I have to pay out Rudy Garcia's contract, so let's make sure we get to the knockout stages."
What's interesting is that like Mazzari's MO is he plays a 3-back. Like he did that when he was at Napoli. Like every other team he's played at, they played 3-back. But the way that Napoli is kind of put together, they play a 4-3-3, and their squad is best as a 4-back. But he did say in interviews that he's studied Spalletti's system in and out. He knows the movements, he knows the tactics, he knows what they need to do. So maybe he can set them up in a way that kind of mirrors that, and maybe can get a breath or a taste of what they did last season. But he's definitely not the guy, in my opinion, that's going to stay through the summer. Like he's finishing out the season with them, and De Laurentiis is going to find somebody else, most likely Italian, because De Laurentiis is a big calcio guy. These guys know calcio, or right? Like, didn't he come out and say like calcio's dead because Rudy Garcia was like,
I forget old man somebody's dead.
It's just interesting to me, man. I don't know. I mean, I was going to talk about this later, like when you asked me, like, do I have any last words? But I'll come back to it with what I want to talk about it. But, you talk about the coaching carousel and some of these other guys that may be brought in. And if De Laurentiis does want to look past bringing in an Italian manager, right now, 17 of the 20 teams in Serie A have an Italian manager. And more times than not, including the guys who are not Italian, if you coach in Serie A, you most likely have played in Serie A as a player in the past. What would be interesting to me is, there's a big up-and-coming guy that I know you like and have very fond memories of by the name of Xabi Alonso, who could do a revolution if Napoli were to bring him in.
He's doing a revolution at Leverkusen right now.
Yeah, exactly. They are on a tear.
This summer, no matter what happens with Leverkusen the rest of the season, he's going to be like everyone. Real Madrid will be calling for him. I wouldn't be shocked because Ancelotti might be gone this summer, and
hell, even Liverpool could.
No, not after this summer. I wouldn't trade him for Klopp, but like when Klopp decides it's time, because we re-extended him. I'll talk to you for sure. For all this time, we thought that Gerrard was going to be the replacement. It's like clearly not. But
yeah, of course.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, Xabi Alonso, maybe get Mascherano on the bench, just reignite 2/3 of the best midfield I've ever seen in Liverpool. I don't know. I'd have a conversation. Xabi Alonso is going to be, honestly, wherever he wants to go, I think. And even if that's staying at Leverkusen for another year, too. Maybe there's something that, Florian Wirtz stays there. I think he's really liked working with him, learn and work with a young superstar.
It all depends if Xabi thinks he's ready or not. You know what I mean?
He's like,
it's one of those weird things where it's like it's all about timing,
He strikes me as a guy that really understands that too. As like he does not seem like someone that's going, because first of all, Xabi Alonso's perfect. He's so smooth and charismatic. He just is. Like there's a lot of confidence that I have in him to kind of make the right choice there. But yeah, he could go wherever, and I think any Italian club would be. I think it'd be interesting to ask. I don't think there's a single team in Italy except for Inter, maybe, that would not swap out their manager for Xabi Alonso. I don't think there's a single club right now that would say, we're good, actually. We like what we have.
What do you think? I'm sorry to go off the tangent, but what do you think about this statement I heard? The best managers, it seems, of like recent time now, when you're talking about former players becoming managers, the most successful ones, albeit a few outliers, were holding midfielders. And it kind of makes sense, doesn't it? Because you see the entire game. You have to work alongside your defense in the possession and in the build-up. Then you see what the offense or what the attackers have to do, the runs that they're making, because you see the passing lanes, and you're that first pass that starts the attack or the counter. And having just that knowledge as a player, when you bring it into your vision, when you take over a team as a manager and you start, tinkering with tactics, this and that, I think that it pays off. You see guys like Arteta, you see guys like Pep, all these guys that were holding midfielders. I mean, right. Pirlo hasn't had the greatest of a managerial career, but kind of cut from the same type of cloth.
Zidane.
Yeah.
Not a holding midfielder, but
And I mean,
I think Ancelotti was a midfielder too, correct?
A little more on the attacking end, but
right.
Another midfielder. But I mean, you can also counter this and mention guys like Gerrard and Lampard. But right. What they had to do in England is a little bit different than say a Pep who came up in the Barcelona system, or like Xabi Alonso, who not only played for Real Madrid, but he played in all these different places. He was coached by some of the best coaches you've seen, and Arteta coming up through Spain and the Spanish system and all that kind of stuff. Pirlo being the guy he is, and being in Italy, playing for Milan and the Italian national team
at Barcelona right now. One of the best.
Exactly.
of our lifetime. I do think it's interesting too. Even beyond that, because there was a lot of discussion with Napoli that they might hire Cannavaro, which was. What he's not been someone that's found a lot of success in management, which is you don't have to be. Same with Gerrard and Lampard. You've had a great playing career. You don't need to be a majorly successful manager, right? It's fine. But I do think it's interesting because we're talking a little bit too about Xavi and Xabi Alonso and some of a lot of the Spanish players from 08 to 12 are now retired or are retiring and moving into that next phase. And we already have two of them. Xavi's already had a lot of success at Barcelona. Maybe not for Barcelona standards, but by most manager standards, he's done very well there. Xabi Alonso seems like his direction is on an upward path. So it's interesting seeing, the Italian 2006 team. No one has really worked out in management there necessarily. Maybe there's still time, but
I think Fabio Grosso is an up and coming guy, in my opinion.
I think people don't like him very much.
Yeah.
I mean, it's also deeply ironic that he ends up in France as a manager, but I think he's not done too well. But yeah, but in
Thiago
Spain,
Motta.
Was Motta
not part of that team? But
Motta is definitely the Euros. Motta I think of this century of Italian players. I'm struggling to think of. I mean, technically, if you want to say I don't think. Did Conte play into the 2000s even? I don't think so.
I'm not sure.
I don't think Inzaghi did either.
Inzaghi played in the 2000s.
Yeah. So, There we go. But like Thiago Motta has been good, but largely like the Spanish national team has an opportunity to do that. And you talk about one of the greatest national teams ever, and a lot of those players playing for two of the best club sides ever too, as well, within Madrid and Barcelona for those times. So yeah, I do think central midfielders are uniquely positioned to do that, like you said, because they are such an integral linking point between defense and attack and are responsible for so much. Makes sense that in management that's going to help you. I think it's also interesting too, like you have managers that weren't really great players. Jurgen Klopp famously, like made it to Bundesliga too, and then was just not a guy that was super successful in his career, but yet has become one of the world's best managers. Maurizio Sarri, has had a successful coaching career. It was not even like in the sport, he was working as a banker, and just it was like his second job that turned into his full, like it just
Sir
doesn't
Alex
always have to
Ferguson.
be. I think Ferguson had like a all right playing career, but yeah. Nagelsmann, I think, got injured young, like really young into like his playing career, and just stopped playing, and is now leading the German national team. I would say Tuchel had a similar story. Like you see it kind of here and there, but yeah, it's an interesting thing to think about too. Like what goes into making a good manager, and I think the ultimate thing is there is no one thing. Right? Like you can say it's being in the best teams. That probably helps, but there's also plenty of people that weren't in the best teams that turned out great. Like it just, it's an interesting thing to think about.
Before we move on to the Premier League, I got one last question. I was, listening to this athletic podcast, and they're talking about how, Napoli is such a unique city in Italy in the way that the fan base treats and supports their team, where like if it's good, the city's buzzing. If they win, the party does not stop. But when they struggle, it's very gloomy. And you're talking about a city that is, touted as one of the more dangerous cities in Italy and this and that. And would you compare Napoli and the fan base to Philadelphia and the Eagles?
So
I think this is a very good comparison.
Just in Naples over the summer, and I was explaining to my wife like that kind of like I was explaining it because we were like, it's immediately obvious the moment that you're in Naples that Napoli, and granted too, we came after they won the title, but there's like stuff everywhere you look. There are murals of Maradona wherever you look. There are murals of the team, and then they still had like banners up on every street of like the starting 11. Or like the Italian shields with like a 3, for their third time. Like it was everywhere you look. And so I was explaining like, yeah, it's like, they hadn't won in a long time, and like the last time they won was Maradona, and he passed recently, and like he was like one of the world's like it just. But they're like a very like, Naples is also known for being like very superstitious and feeling like, and also feeling aggrieved. Like they have that second city syndrome where, they're not the main city of Italy. Like Philadelphia isn't the main city of the USA, yet they feel like they should be, more of like a. They
have like a chip on their shoulder.
Right.
Working class people.
Yes, definitely. And like it's you see that in cities. I think you could say Liverpool have a similar identity. You could say Marseille have a similar identity, right? And those cities are also known for being coastal port cities with crime issues in the past, right? And histories too of mismanagement, underdevelopment by the government, which has led to sort of a distinct sort of like underdog resentment type of attitude. Yeah, I think it's a fair comparison. Yeah, definitely an interesting place for sure. I would say like on the safety side, granted, I was only there for a short period of time, never felt unsafe for even half a second there. It was amazing time. So.
and like in Italy,
I did feel a little unsafe crossing the street. You got to really just be. That's the only time I felt unsafe because they do not like traffic laws. There are truly a suggestion. Like it is. You're definitely taking your life in your hands when you step off the sidewalk. That's the only thing I'll say. But
granted, in Italy, they soccer players are the biggest celebrities that they can be, in the country. In Naples, you're a god. You are a god. They treat you like none other. Like coolly. Like you talk about the racism issues in Italy and all this other type of stuff. Like Koulibaly just absolutely loved living in Italy, loved being in Naples. And you hear all these other things, and he would always come out and be like, I've never had that experience, because the people of Naples just absolutely adore the team. They love me, and I've had nothing but like just wonderful times. So like the way that they support their players is second to none. And you're going to see pretty quickly the reaction to Mazzari based off of the results that Napoli get. If they struggle, they're going to be calling for his head. And if they're winning, they're going to treat him like the second coming of Christ. It is what it is. We can only wait and see.
Yeah, absolutely. Looking forward to it. Let's move to England, where Dom, I'd like to issue a formal apology to Chelsea Football Club, because I said they have a habit of just rolling over for Manchester City in years past. Part of this goes back to when Liverpool were in a title race with Manchester City, and they beat Chelsea 6-0. And I needed Chelsea to have some kind of result in that game, to give us a little bit of hope, give us some edge in the table, and they just got wiped immediately. In fact, it still pops up every now and again, because I watch these goal compilations, and it's like 10 shock results in the Premier League. And it's a picture, I don't know if you remember, it was when Higuain was on Chelsea, and it's like two City players kind of flanking him, sort of like fucking with him after the game, like trying to like shake his hand, and he's just like, so that always sticks in my mind when we have Chelsea Manchester City. However, Mauricio Pochettino, I'm sorry, sir, I was not familiar with your game, brother. 4-4. One of the goals, there really wasn't that many great goals in this game. One of the games of the season for sure so far, especially in the Premier League, but maybe even in both the leagues we talk about here. Amazing. It's the first 4-4 result Pep has ever had, which jogging. Although I guess
Crazy
it's not
step.
a totally common scoreline. It's not often we get a 4-4 result. But back and forth all throughout. Of course, what would a game be without some VAR controversy at these points? But had just about everything. It had, of course, Haaland goals, Raheem Sterling with a goal, and Nicholas Jackson was really encouraging to celebrate in front of the Manchester City fans, and he just, I don't know, he ended up not really directing his attention that way all that much. But great game. I think, it's hard to take so much, or too much away from singular games, right? But I think for Chelsea, this is, again, a positive step, right? They obviously beat Spurs. That's because Spurs were down to 9 men. You expect them to win under those circumstances. But this is a much more tangible, kind of proof of concept here that Pochettino and what he's doing is, you're seeing it like a car that's like had to get jumped, and it's like you're just leave it running for a while. It'll be fine, but then you turn it off and it takes you like 2 or 3 turns to get it back. It just kind of, it feels like it needs more time. They're going to get Nkunku back soon. That could be a big boost to them, although Jackson now, if he's going to start getting into a little bit of more goal-scoring form, that could be good. Conor Gallagher has started to look better this season. There's pieces here that I think you can start to be positive about. If you're Manchester City, I don't know that you're worried about a game like this. It felt like a little bit of a freak game, but this is the second or third time you've kind of lost control of a game. They lost it against Wolves, I think, for similar reasons. Even against Arsenal, it felt like they lost control of that match for a period. Like, that's not a common thing with City, and that would give me some pause. At the same time, that you have Erling Haaland, who at any moment can turn any tenth of a chance into a goal. So it's like you feel good about your position still. You feel good about the fact that this is a team that is perennially also known for being a little bit slower in the first half of the season and really picks up pace, really picks up speed in the second half. But yeah, a really fascinating game, a really fun game, and I liked it. It was honestly, it paused me from watching NFL games. I not like it didn't get a second screen. It was just on the main screen until it was gone. I was like, wow, that was actually amazing. It was really good.
I had an excuse to keep it on at work this weekend because the Eagles didn't play. So nobody was begging me to put football on. So I kept that game on. And it's funny, you talk about City losing control of the match. that really means that City just didn't control both halves, because it was a tale of two halves. In the first half, Chelsea looked the much better team. They had more possession. The ball was in their offensive third more times than not. You mentioned Conor Gallagher. He was very good in this game. But, into the second half, City gains control. They start coming back. It starts raining. Rodri scores that fourth goal to go ahead. You think it's all said and done. I was talking to one of the guys at the bar who I was serving, and he is a United fan. So he was rooting for Chelsea, which is weird, but it was just because he hates City so much. And, we're sitting there like, oh, here we go. Here it is. They scored that third. Chelsea pulled it back. And then we're like, oh, it's going to happen. It's going to happen. There it is. And then, Chelsea end up coming back and scoring a fourth to equalize. A very interesting game. I will give credit where credit's due. Chelsea just needs to do more in order to convince me that, they are trending upwards. A lot of those doubts that they're back would be answered once we come back from the international break, right? They have to now show and string a few really good performances together, and not just against, mid to low table teams. They have to do it against the big teams as well. They need to steal points. They need to start making a run up the table if they want to say, hey, we're back. You need to take us serious. It's going to be interesting, but there's a lot of promising things. You mentioned Nico Jackson. I mean, the kid has kind of burst onto the scene, and I think that's good with Nkunku coming back, because it provides competition and it raises the level of the work being done in training to prepare for matches, in order to see who's going to start and who is getting more playing time, and really makes players play with a chip on their shoulder, because they want to earn that starting spot and they want to be the guy. So, Pochettino may be cooking, but we need to see. We need a couple more weeks before we can, really cement that down.
Yeah, it's been great. The title race in the Premier League this season could be really fascinating. And like we mentioned with SerieA, when we turned from the international break, you have Manchester City versus Liverpool, which is a fixture that over the years has provided lots of drama. Some of the best games I've ever seen, personally, just in terms of quality, in terms of just great play. 7:30, which sucks. Because it's either my mood is ruined for the whole day, or I'm happy, but it's it kind of wears off by the afternoon. You're just moving on to it just doesn't feel like, even if it goes your way. Although I guess the rest of your weekend is really kind of rose tinted there, but it obviously has the potential to really turn. So going into the international break, Manchester City top of the Premier League with 28 points. Liverpool and Arsenal level on points with 27. Liverpool ahead just on goal difference. Spurs still hanging around. They lost over the weekend, victim to Dom. I got to give credit to your Wolverhampton Wanderers with a comeback in stoppage time. Saved the drama. They surely know how in the second act how to get you.
They must have heard that I picked them on our table, and now they're
I think it's fair to say that was the turnaround. I think is knowing that some random guy from America has him in a very meaningless fantasy draft. For Spurs, I think this is a come down to earth moment, which is fine when you consider the injuries and the suspensions that they're dealing with. The problem is that only one of the suspensions gets returned after the international break. That's Udogie. You still have Romero out for 2 more games, and James Maddison, we found out, isn't due back now till January. In fact, the injury was a little worse than they initially expected, so not going to be back until the new year. Mickey Van de Ven also not going to be back to the new year.
It's a tough one.
That is tough because they don't have a ton of defensive depth, and you add on the fact that Romero's out for another 2 games, they're going to have to rely on a back line that's not by any stretch their first choice. Maddison provided that really good creative threat from the midfield, so going to be a little bit of a challenge for Spurs, but I think they still play well enough, and they're a few minutes away from this game being another 3 points, and you have the whole rising against adversity narrative going into international break. But as far as like being like contenders for a title, I think you can say that you don't expect this team to hang with that race, but for getting back into the Champions League, that's definitely on for them still. I truly think it is, and I know we keep mentioning, but I think people have just not really clicked with it yet. England could very well have 5 Champions League teams next year because 2 leagues get a 5th Champions League team this season because of the expansion to the Champions League next year. So 5th place in the Premier League could very likely, depending on how the coefficient works out, get you into the Champions League. So you don't even have to finish top 4 anymore. You're just getting in the top 5 would get you access there. So I think Spurs could be on for that still. It's not a guarantee that is that position, but it does seem favorable to England that they would achieve that.
Well, speaking top 5, right? If you're trying to get there and you need to be there, you need to have a perfect record at home, maybe like Aston Villa, right? Villa. It's every week. I have to make sure I get one. I have to stay on brand, right? Listen, Villa beating Fulham, remain perfect at home. Matt, what we saying about Aston Villa right now?
What are we saying about Aston Villa right now is that when you play them at home, here's the stats, Chief. 6 games played, 6 games won, 23 goals scored at home in 6 games, which is impressive, and only 5 conceded. They have not been easy in that park.
Credit to them, man.
So here, just looking at the rest of the league, right? Liverpool also 6 wins from 6 at home, but Liverpool 17 goals scored, only 2 conceded at home. Manchester City so far have only had 5 home games. They're 5-0 at home. 16 goals scored, 3 conceded. They're up there with 2 of the best teams in England of the last 5-6 years, 2 of the better teams in Europe at home. And we've talked a little bit about Emery and what this Villa team has done, and just continue to impress. They've had a few dropped results. So that Forest game was a little strange, but largely speaking, especially like we said, like we mentioned, when they're at home, this is a team that and that matters. It matters when you can make your home a fortress and when you make it really hard on teams to come there and get results. When you're talking about a European race, which we expect Aston Villa to be in European competition of some sort next season. We don't know exactly what, but if you're talking about potential Champions League, yeah, this matters. And for when, by the way, they advance out of their group stage and in the Conference League and start playing, knockout stages there too, having that home field advantage is really important. And having a place where you feel like you can get good results, you play clearly to an even higher level, that's no small thing.
Yeah. I think it's very interesting too, because Aston Villa having such a successful season this year is kind of, in my opinion, dropping the stock of Roberto De Zerbi and Brighton. Brighton in a tough, run of form right now. And this was a team that, everybody was high on coming into the beginning of the season. It seems like Aston Villa has taken their place as that team.
Yeah, definitely. They're definitely the sexy kind of mid-table team that's making the foray into Europe. That's where Brighton was, last year. I think Brighton, there was some writing on the wall with them that it was a little unsustainable. And then you look at their we talked about their underlying defensive numbers earlier in the season, and that they were actually in the bottom 5 for expected goals against. That has not gone away, and that's really. That has been, I think, the biggest area for them. They're still a team that can cut teams open, and you see that. They have a good goal-scoring record. They've had a few injury problems, which has been out of their control this season. But 21 goals conceded at this stage of the season. That's hard to, when you're competing with other top teams. If you want to really break into England's top 6, and compete with these really big clubs. That's an area that you can't afford to be, so loose at the back and so open at the back. Can that improve this season? Honestly, probably not. That feels like something that is going to be addressed over the summer, and you hope to improve on that. I think it's all about what your expectations were for Brighton to start the season. I think some people maybe got carried away with where they expected them to be, and you're seeing that sort of balance out a little bit with a little bit more reality. But I think this is still a team that's dangerous on any given day because we know they have the attacking talent, and I think are like on a must-watch kind of basis, because it's like there's going to be goals in most Brighton games.
Yeah. What do you think about the situation in Newcastle right now? The fans are turning on the players. Kieran Trippier's yelling in the crowd, telling them this is your team's captain, yelling at the fans, saying, asking them, do you know how many injuries we have? Which they really do. They have a ton of injuries to a ton of key players. It's really tough for them right now. It's just, things are looking a little rocky.
Yeah, Callum Wilson is going to be out. Similar to James Madison, I think they're looking at like January 24, which, by the way, we're going to be in 2024, which is just God almighty. Just
Don't remind me, man.
Don't
remind me. I told my students the other day, they asked me, they were like, what year you graduate high school? I went, 2012. This year will be 12 years since we've been out of high school.
As long as we were in school. You know what I mean? Like, it's the same, like...
Yeah. That makes it even sound even longer.
Callum Wilson, Alexander Isak, Jacob Murphy, Harvey Barnes on the attacking end, all injured. You have Matt Targett and Sven Botman dealing with injuries along with Dan Burn. That's...
Champions League goal scorer, Dan Burn.
That's a lot of key play. Mountain of a man, Dan Burn. Mr. Dan Burn, who's like... What is he? I think he's like...
What a name.
I think he's like 6'6", but wins like 50% of his aerial duels or something. Like, brother, come on, what are you doing? Like, it's like being 7 foot and not dunking in the NBA. It's like, you're built for this. You should be doing way better at this. I'm gonna get his aerial duel number right, because I don't want to do a disservice to him. But he is not someone that, for his height, that wins aerial duels at the rate that he should. It's just all I would like to say about it.
What a name, too, Dan Burn. That sounds like a 70s TV show, like a police TV show, like protagonist.
It's honestly, it's proper England right there.
Burn. Dan Burn.
You're not going to get much better than that. I'm scrolling FB ref to find his actual aerial duel percentage. It's going to be funny when he's at like 71%. I'm just completely wrong. But I remember in the past him having a really bad aerial duel rate. And for someone that is as tall as he is, should just be a lot better. Okay, it's 64.9%, which is like... I
still feel that's too low.
That's okay. For reference, Kieran Trippier has a 77.3 percentage aerial duel rate. Trippier doesn't see as many, which is fair.
And he's also probably going up against, wingers who are probably shorter than most strikers. So, there's a little difference there, but
Dan Burn is 6'7". I would expect at 6'7" to be, a little better.
But at that height, you don't move as fast as, players that are shorter than you. You may not have the explosiveness.
Okay, but you have a shorter gap to get to the ball. Like you don't have to do as much work to get to the ball when it's in the air. Would be my. Maybe I'm crazy. I don't know. But that's just what I would say. I'm gonna look up Lisandro Martinez's numbers because.
Yeah, there we go.
Talk about true difference makers right here.
Yeah, you want to look at the other end of the spectrum.
Yeah, let's get a short king on here. Now, Lisandro Martinez, of course, dealing with an injury, so his numbers, you're not going to have a good representation at Lisandro Martinez. Okay, never mind. Lisandro Martinez is a 16.7 in his defense. He only saw 6 aerial duels. He won 1 and lost 5 so far this season, but, there it is. So Harry Maguire, known for being good in the air, I think generally. This is a good reference point. Is at 78.6. Pretty good.
So, I'm trying to find, because this is another one. Like what about Cannavaro? We're talking Fabio Cannavaro.
Cannavaro's aerial duel rate may not have that because some of the more like advanced statistics they don't have on FB Ref. because there's like some kind of like mapping and like data collection that doesn't always come across as well. But he was known for being like very good in the air, despite his height. But yeah, some of those, that's the bummer with like some of the advanced stats now, is it's like it'd be cool to be able to go back and see all of them, but it's just unfortunately
somebody needs to pay somebody to just watch games and take the advanced
that's
stats.
literally what they do with these, is they'll go back and like watch games and like count like actions and stats to build these things out. With expected goals and stuff like that, it's a little easier because like that doesn't change as much. Like you just have to look at like where the shot location was and who's around. But yeah, for some of the other stats, you do actually have to go back and like pay people to do it. I know in fantasy football, like American fantasy football, they do the same where like they have gone back to build out like old, because you like they used to not track like catches and like fumbles and
That's crazy.
They just didn't count a lot of that stuff in like older, so they actually pay people to do the same thing. They'll pay people to watch old games and like track the fantasy stats of the players, and it helps them build models and stuff. So yeah, listen, if you're looking for side work, ask around. You could you could watch hundreds of hours of old sports and obsessively write down in your notepad, or you could do it for free like I do. Like that's your choice.
Sponsor us.
Anything to say before we get out of here?
Yeah, two things. Number one, I think that, although I have always been a vocal supporter of Stefano Pioli, I think that this draw has really sent me over the edge. I think that Milan needs a new manager. We mentioned Xabi Alonso, and I want over the summer nothing more than to Milan to break the bank and bring in Xabi Alonso to Milan. Come to the fashion capital of the world, one of the best-looking men in football, if not the best-looking man in football. Actually, this is what would be amazing. They'd have the two best-looking men in football, one as a player and one as a coach.
Yeah.
That is my first thing. Please, Pioli out and replace him with somebody with an identity and a direction for this team, because it's you go from beating PSG to almost losing to Lecce if it wasn't for the help of VAR. It's just ridiculous. The other thing, this is not IRL related. It's virtual related. Get ready, guys. Get your bingo sheet out. Check off the Dom mentions FIFA. They released a Megan Rapinoe end of era card. Okay, so first off, Megan Rapinoe, in one of her, if not the last game of her career, suffers an Achilles injury, which pretty much takes her out for the rest of the season. Probably just ended her career, which is a tough break. Very polarizing player. I tend to look back at her career as a member of those World Cup winning teams. Back when, more Americans knew the players on the women's national team than they could name players on the men's national team, because they were just that much more successful. They gave her an end of era card. Pretty good card, but I want to say a good 90% of the player base absolutely despises the card just because it's her. They made it the most disliked card on Futbin, which is like a reference site similar to like what Matt was just on with IRL stuff. And they made an effort in 24 hours to make it the most disliked card. And I just think it's unfair. You could say what you want about her as a person, or, with her politics and stuff like that. But, when it comes to a video game item, you're really just looking at it as the player, right? And she was a really good soccer player. And I think that it's totally unfair that people are just going to, do the squad building challenge just to discard the card or whatever it is. So, I mean, say what you want. I have her in my team. I'm pissing off people every time I score with her. It's great. But I did want to mention that, just shed a little light, because she did have a really good career. I mean, there's some very iconic moments with the women's national team involving her, alongside Abby Wambach or Alex Morgan or whoever you may say. But, you talk about that trio, you talk about Wambach, you talk about Rapinoe, you talk about Carly Lloyd. It's what brought the U.S. Women's World Cup glory.
Yeah, she's one of the best U.S. athletes of our lifetime. Very accomplished, especially on the international stage. And honestly, the reason that she's controversial is, to me, not that controversial. Like, she just thinks that gay people shouldn't be killed or shouldn't have to live in fear of being discriminated against. To me, that's not that crazy of a thought. But yeah,
people talk about her ego, like Zlatan Ibrahimovic isn't a thing.
Like there's not fan edits of Zlatan and his personal drive. I have terrible news, Dom. In local news, the Atlantic City Margaritaville is on fire. So
yeah, I saw that.
How did you see that?
Facebook. And plus, my mom works in Atlantic City. She told me there was a fire at resorts.
Okay, I didn't know that your mom was plugged in. I know that your mom was like an Atlantic City plugged in person. I didn't know she was giving you live updates about it. Shocking news to me. Okay,
I saw a thing. I saw a news article on Facebook, and then I called my mom and talked to her. She said,
"What a fucking cultural loss." Yeah. Okay, like, why is no one more concerned? We lost Margaritaville.
First Jimmy Buffett, now Margaritaville.
It's a sign. I think it's a sign.
Oh God!
That's the only thing we can do here. Well. We'll be back next week with an update on our fantasy scores. Maybe wipe that smile off Dom's face when he realizes he's made terrible. I actually don't know how we're doing at all. I haven't even.
Don't say I've made terrible mistakes.
Listen, I think you might have made some good choices. I think I also might have made some good choices. We'll find out more conclusively next week when we tally up our points so far from our fantasy team draft. In our first international break to kind of recollect and find out where we stand. Until then, though, enjoy the Euro qualifiers. We'll talk to you next week. See ya.